Okay, welcome everyone to the Shauna Foundation's Library Poetry Tour. I'm Skip Shea, the Executive Director of the Shauna Shea Memorial Foundation. We're a 501c3 nonprofit named after my daughter who passed away. And she also was a poet. So that's why we decided to do the Library Poetry Tour, which takes place here in Milford where we are tonight, and it'll be in Uxbridge tomorrow night. We are very so grateful that the podium is humming. Grateful to the Milford Cultural Council, the Uxbridge Cultural Council, and the Mass Cultural Council for who have helped fund this program for 2 years now. So we're very grateful to them. This is the last stop of the tour this year, or the beginning of the last stop of the tour this year. And we have an exceptional poet and a very good friend of not only mine, but also of the foundation's. Worcester guy. We're in Milford, and I'm very happy and pleased. I know John. It's John Edward Keough. I know him from other worlds, like the film world. And whenever I was on Facebook one day, and I saw a poem, I said, "Did you write that?" and that's when I said, "Oh, we have to get you here because." In particular to wrap up the year, because I think what you have to say is very important. So with that, welcome John Edward Keough. You're welcome.
Hello. Hello. I'm going to turn it down a little bit, I think, and then make it less hot. How are we doing? All right. So I'm John Edward Keough. I'm super excited about this. I love the Shauna Foundation. I love Skip and Anna. I like everything that they stand for, and I also love the opportunity to support, poetry. I think that, Massachusetts in particular has a long history of poetry in public, and poetry being a part of our world, our way of talking and thinking. And I think we kind of lost that for a long time. There's been a shift away from the humanities. I actually wrote a report about that not that long ago, about the amount of humanities degrees in 1970 versus today, and it's not good. I've been a poet my whole life. My mom was a writer, and she was always working on her novel, and she encouraged me to read, and she would let me read anything. In fact, I got in trouble in elementary school. I was 9 years old, and I got caught reading Dalton Trumbo's Johnny Get Your Gun, which is not a great book for a 9-year-old. Anyways, in the book, since we're here on TV and we have no filter, the main character is a armless, legless man who has also lost his ability to speak. And he can only engage with the rest of the world through his eyes and nose, and the book takes place completely in his mind. It is a traumatic book. But part of the book, he remembers snippets of songs and poems from throughout his time. Ooh, we have another person coming in. Yay! And so I remember getting in trouble for reading that book. And I don't know that would happen necessarily today, because it does make sense that I don't know you want to show a 9-year-old Dalton Trumbo. But it kind of inspired me to want to read books that were kind of in the stacks, right? And poetry is often in the stacks. And you have to go and find obscure poets. And one day I discovered Mr. Charles Bukowski. And Charles was a drunk, and he was a serial womanizer, and a lot of other amazing things. But he was a lyricist who liked to talk about things that were happening in real life, and then kind of exaggerate them just a little bit. But his turn of phrase really got me excited. And so I started writing, and by writing I mean thousands and thousands and thousands of poems. I probably have in my office at Hollywood Film Group, that's the company that I own, I have reams of yellow legal pad paper full of poems that have not yet been typed up. I do have a lot that are typed up, and so today I'm super excited to read to you the first edition of my book of poems, There, There. There is 12 poems, some that rhyme and some that don't, and they all deal with the theme of consolation. How to console someone, or maybe if they're not being consoled, to help them. And then the expression of the point of view is often from someone who doesn't understand why the person or persons that they need isn't consoling them. And so, my background is, I don't know if I'm going to spend the whole time talking about me, but, rough life. Some of it not my fault, and some of it very much my fault. And so it's exciting to be able to use this space and to use this time to kind of express those things. So I'm going to start with the poems, and then I'll try to give a little bit of information about them after the poem. I think that giving you too much to begin is cheating in poetry world. All right? All right. So the first poem is called Around and Back Again. Startled is not how I would describe it. Noise levels are balancing. As I move the slider to the correct position, there is a look of confusion as we go around. There is a house on the corner. It has insulation in peculiar places, and echoes are its only sounds. From singers long ago, and around we go. I can see that this is not my land. I was born of another country. That country is far from here, and I yearn to return. Go around me. But you say that this is a place that has within it the shape that could fill the last piece of a puzzle I did not design. Guess who's back? Doubt is a malingerer. Doubt is a mere shadow. Doubt is construction poorly done. Doubt is immature fear. Back again. Around and around and around, you spin me. Around and around and around we go. Where will it stop? No one knows. There is only one way to see the end. We must go around and back again. So one of my lives was as a sound guy in various capacities. I once worked at the Middle East a long time ago as a young kid who carried speakers. And then, I had various trips and travails being a sound tech, a mixer, a live technician. And it's funny that whether you're at the Middle East downstairs dealing with like hip hop and hardcore metal groups, or you're at a big stadium dealing with some, famous musician, or you're at Longview Farm Studio in North Brookfield dealing with the Rolling Stones, or you're mixing live music for a church on a Sunday, people always complain about the sound. And it doesn't matter whether you turn it up or down, you will always get complaints. And so very much this poem is from memories of mine being in different places and hearing people come up to me and complain about the sound. So, the next poem is called Incident Control. When there is no place to go, where do you go? When there is no place to cry, where do you cry? Is there a place for you or me beyond incident control? That time when you say that the rules mean more than the things that you feel, the things that you feel, the things. Do you even know exactly who you are supposed to be? Do you happen to understand your place? When there is no one to tell, who do you tell? When there is no one to hold, who do you hold? When they say that they will do the things that they said, but you don't want them to, what do you say when they try? What do you say when they do? If I played a song and sang that song, would you listen? If it was a hymn, if it was a psalm, if it was a salsa, if it was a waltz, if it was 64 bars of gold. Do you see the notes in the glistening of the rain? Can you hear the words over the last of the alarms? If, in the end, it is the end, where do you stand? If the wave was 1,000 feet tall, would you stand on the shore of the beach as it crashed? What would you sing if there was nothing left to sing? What key is it in? Part of part of being a sound guy is that every sound guy is also a musician, and usually a frustrated musician in some capacity. I always would hear about people when I would write a song and play it. They would tell me how it sounded to them like a song that they once didn't finish. And all different types. Again, the same thing, whether you're in a bar or in a concert hall or at a church, people will express to that person that's willing to listen to them the things that they didn't get done. And so this poem was very much about writing a song. Dazzling sparks of light. In the darkness, where we spoke last, there was a moment that I expected. You stood at the dais, and you brought up your shoulders and proclaimed with all your might that you were going to hide in procedure. In procedure. In procedure. I wrote in my imaginary diary that I was heartbroken, and I scratched out the little bubble hearts over my eye. I cannot cartoon for you any longer. I cannot confirm for you an agenda. I cannot claim that you are a friend. I cannot chance that you will remember, not the 21st night of September. For you did hold in your arms. Remember the child. Remember the children. Oh, death, where is your sting? Your putrid little sting. Your weak little sting. You're not even a person. You are defeated. And in the golden hills above the sparkling seas, the dazzling display will be. The children that we lost, the children that we lost, the children that we lost, they are dancing. So this poem comes from a rough memory. So I grew up in Boston, and in particular in Jamaica Plain, and several of the children in my class were murdered in various street violence. People don't remember, but in the late 80s, Boston was a very dangerous place to live. Before the Massachusetts miracle, right? There was this time period where crime really, really dropped. And I had many friends who passed away. And it's hard to reconcile when you're a kid, when you ran around in groups, whether you were part of the reason why the person died, right? And so this was very much me thinking about another friend of mine who was doing life in prison, and his refusal to acknowledge the pain that we went to, and I think very much it's holding him back. He's been up for parole, I think 6 times now, and he just won't accept what he did. And I think that if he did, he would go home. He would go home very much, because I think that they're sympathetic to the fact that it happened when he was such a young man. And they've actually changed the law since and given him the opportunity to apply. Now, when you're younger and you commit a crime, you have an opportunity to see parole, but he just won't say that he did. So this poem is very much about him. Okay. This next poem is an interesting poem. I will only let you down. There was a certain glow through the grass at dawn, lying underneath an overpass, and the cement has softened. That glow is unforgettable, in that you can imagine for just a second, a flash, that you are not yourself. When you admit that you are depressed, that in fact you are in danger of tasting that elixir of despair. And only then you remember that you have been through worse, that you have faced death. Countless times you have been, before you turned 10, that death was in the hands of family. Somehow you are alive. Somehow you get up. Somehow you shake off the night. Somehow you stretch to the sky. There is no ammunition to be passed. When you cannot be insulted by anyone worse than what you think of yourself, so you start to walk, a bit of a limp. By the time you pass the corner and turn into the new Kelly Square, your beard glistens in the sun. You're free to do whatever it is you do. Somewhere, there is someone who is, in their way, praying that you will get there, that you will make it. Are you ever going to? Doesn't matter. You are wearing your best. And in front of Dunkin' Donuts, the regulars say, that shirt looks nice. I got it at Albun Samaritano, and you forget that you are you and enjoy the glow of the kindness. I think that's the poem that Skip read that led to me being picked. And that poem is very much about a homeless friend of mine. And I was myself homeless not that long ago. A little bit more than 6.5 years ago, I was homeless, living in the bus station in Worcester. And some of the people that were homeless then are still homeless now. And there's a unwillingness to kind of go out. And I always found it interesting. There's a place called Albun Samaritano, which is a charity that gives away clothes. And in particular, what they do is they allow you to go and shop like a regular person, but you just don't have to pay. And so when the folks go to get the clothes, and then they're wearing the clothes, those next couple days, they are very much out in front of the world and happy. And you can see that that change of clothes has made them glow. And I remember this one guy, he had gotten like a Red Sox jersey, and it was brand new, right? Brand new, and someone had just donated the whole thing, which is very nice. And he was so proud. And someone's given him $1, in front of the Dunkin' Donuts, and that poem came to me like that, unbidden. So, all right. The next one is called All Together Now. There was a light on the side of the house, but no one is home. It is a just in case, a just because. When you left, you stayed on. They passed from room to room and chair to chair, softly, slowly, and thought about conversations, not dates, not places, not things. It says somewhere in the good book, I forget which page, but it is there, that it is all a vapor, all a show. So we might as well eat and be merry. I don't drink anymore, so that's out. I like seltzers, though, the fruity ones, but back to the subject at hand. They were not the same without you. The thing that filled the rooms was you. The thing that made the dates was you. So they moved about, as if they could stir the dust into a faux you, a golem, to dance with, and sing with, and sigh, to talk with, and laugh with, and lie. There was an argument that began ostensibly about the Oxford comma. In the end, it was about your future. No matter what Strunk and White say, I swept the hallways and the door jambs. I piled all the furniture into the foyer. I folded the socks and the old overalls. I put the things that were theirs into bins. I stacked all the bins neatly into the garage. I covered it all with sheets of plastic. But when I drive away after I mow the lawn, I see that old light and I just leave it on. So that poem was written after a location scout for a movie, The Rat King. So a young filmmaker named Esme Oster from Northampton, Massachusetts. She had this script which was really good, and she was trying to get it made. And so, of course, I get myself roped into many of these things. And I went on a location scout with her. She's very good. She set up all kinds of meetings and opportunities. She'll probably watch this and be excited that I mentioned it. Well, we went on one particular location scout to this barn, right? And it was like a house with a barn directly attached, one of those old ones. I think there's a certain name for it, but basically the house is facing the street and the barn is on the back of the house. And when we were walking around, I noticed that there was one light bulb that was still powered. And in that area where the light bulb was like all the stuff from the house that had been collected. So then a guy came who was like he was the guy taking care of him. And I asked him, hey, why do you leave that one light on? And so then he told me, he said, well, my parents passed away a few years ago, and my sister and I used to live here with them, and she hasn't been back, so I leave it on just in case she comes back. And I thought, oh man, that's a great story. So I wrote this poem thinking about how parents would stay in a place probably long past when they should, waiting for a child to come back, especially one that was like that important in the family, like 4 people. So that was that poem. That was for Esme. There you go. All right. Ooh, this one's good. Intolerable. What is it that they say in the middle of the night? Did you dance or sing in the face of danger? There was a line I once saw written down in a book, in the margin. just a throwaway, an afterthought. The line escapes me, just kind of cobwebs in the attic. It is still there, but not there, you know? I sang it once in front of a person or people, and they clapped along to the tune, smiling. The boss came around the corner and he said, "Boy, you need to lift those amps and mix that board." I grabbed my dolly and I threw the old Marshalls on it. The echoes rang out as I went down the hall. On the stage sat an old guitar man. He couldn't carry his own axe anymore, so it goes. It was brought to him, handled like a baby, and he came alive a bit with it in his lap. I built the stack and ran the cables, the lines plugged in. I ran the order, cleared the mix, started with the game. Those old distorted boxes hummed alive, and he began to strum for me, to play the empty house. I spun those little knobs in a flurry, in a flash, my hands on fire. The house speaker crackled and hummed. The old mic lines tried to jump in, but I was too fast, and he saw it. He stood for the first time and sang to me, "Channel up, boyo!" It rang across the seats and through me. I heard the muffle in the lows, and I shaped them out. I read the high highs, and I settled the mids. He called out the channels one by one, and I mixed. For a moment, before the lights came up, I mixed like I was the Grammy winner, like we were on tour. He sang that old song, and the crew sang along. Every note, every beat, every line and time. That room hummed. That song sang itself. Every mix since then tries to compare itself to that. Every time I try to top it, and I keep on. Another sound guy poem. Brian O'Donovan, he used to host the show, A Celtic Sojourner, which was an amazing show. You can listen to it in the archives of GBH. It is just a beautiful, beautiful show. I used to do concerts, Celtic Sojourner Christmas and a Celtic Sojourner thing every once in a while. And I was lucky enough to attend one and do sound there. And one of the Hilltoppers was there. And he, for sound check, did the Unicorn by Four Horsemen. So like, the Unicorn. So he sang that song. And I thought it was amazing. And I remember mixing that day. And normally you mix with a team because it's when it's those kind of big concert halls, you can't just have one mix. But we had an old Mackie, it was like 64 channels. And so I had to manually mix it, you remember all the knobs. And he knew the lines, the channels, like he knew what to do. And when you have a musician who knows what the sound guy needs, it's not just a check 1 2, check 1 2. They sing in the right places and you kind of get that space. So that's a poem about him. Ooh, this is another good one. All right, this is a short poem. At rest, I think. The sound of you in the early part of dawn sometimes makes me filled with rage. Not that I am mad at you, not that I am mad at you. I am reminded of a boy or a girl who was left behind, who we were too late for. The alarm sounded just like the time before. We were out the door, but we got there after. Not that we are late, not that we are late. We got there when we did, when the alarms got us to get to that place where we are needed. But you are moving on the carpet in the hallway. Sometimes it is louder than you think. Not that I am mad at you, not that at all. So one of the projects we're working on is called Burning Down the House. It's a documentary about firefighters, and in particular, the firehouses that they live in that are just in horrible shape. Shocking, really, shape. And one of the firefighters, he told me a story about how he would go on these fire calls, 14 or 15 calls in the night, and it's like high stress and constant. And then he would go home, and his wife would ask him to do the dishes. And she would do it kind of matter-of-factly, and he would be really mad. But he wouldn't be mad at her, he would be mad that he was getting mad because he was so tired and so stressed from the thing. It would take him a couple days. And then he said that sometimes when she walks down the hallway, I'm upset with her. I thought that was just such a very specific image, and so I wrote that poem from there. All right, so the next poem, it's actually a series of poems, so let me drink a little water. It's 3 poems that are all connected. It's called Ginger Ambition, a series, and each poem connects to the next. I did this for the Frank O'Hara Prize in Worcester, and so I finished 5th. So, those of you who are out there on public television, you can call up the board, the Worcester County Poetry Association, and tell them how much you think about this series. So Ginger and Bishop. All right, so the first one's called Red Book. It is not what I see, you see, I came back. Once upon a 3 o'clock nap, the greatest institution, I thought thoughts that I could not see. You see, shall we dance again? Shall we dance again? When you walk, there is a clock that people see, as if we all don't look, as if we all aren't in love, you see. You stand out in a crowd, I see you in a mirror, I see. The second poem in the series, Freckles. They say we all have them, and that they are a mark for us arcane, our signal flare. Mine have long faded, and what is left are moles. They have moles. They are not the dangerous ones, they're safe. They call attention to our eyes, which are blue and green and brown. We see things differently, again. When the new others come, will we remember how they pointed at our freckles and laughed? Would you stand for a marked one? Would you cry for those with scars? Would you even hesitate? Dare. The third in the series, Underneath It All. My skin is not the same as yours. When I stand in the sun each April, I burn, I burn, I burn. When I wait a week after, I bronze. My bronze is different than yours. Mine has an orange tinge. I see, I see, I see that you are not different from me. My hair is not curly but wavy. You can sail upon it as the sea. I swim, you swim, we swim. The salt in my eyes stings. Why can't we dance like we did? Why can't we sing like we did? Why can't I say sorry? Why can't you forgive me? If I was brown, would you believe me? Is my ginger ambition not enough? I was once the other, the elders say, but I am but one of the land. My eyes are brown and sing the trees. Electric nights play orange fire. Your hands were once in my beard. I would die to protect you. I will die anyways. Okay, so that series is realistically my response to what I think seems to happen, and that is that America, we always have to have an other group. And so the Irish very much were the others at one point, and we did not get treated well at all. And my parents were both immigrants, and so they experienced several things. And in fact, recently one of my cousins was arrested and shipped back to Ireland. And so the Irish should know what's going on when they're being shipped back or sent to a place that they really don't know. And I wanted to put myself into this character of a person who loved a family or loved a person that was different than them, and other people were telling them you can't, and then they were taken away, and what they thought about when they were taken away. So, all right, 2 more poems. We're almost done. It's super exciting. All right, so this poem has a little bit of a story to it. This poem was originally published in America magazine in 2013. Sorry, I wrote down 2023. That's not true. In 2013, so America magazine is a Catholic magazine that is made by everybody's ordained. So they're all deacons and priests that work at this particular magazine. It's in New York City. And for many, many years, it would be the one most associated with the Jesuits. So the Jesuit kind of order, this magazine was theirs. And there was a poetry editor there that I had a correspondence with when I was in trouble, right? So I got in trouble when I was in my youth, and I spent a little bit of time in prison. And so he and I struck up, James Torrance, a correspondence, and we wrote to each other back and forth, back and forth. And he encouraged me in my poetry. And I'd already been published at that point several times. But for a magazine like that, those are paying magazines, paying gigs. And that is very rare in the poetry world, as we know. This is one of those, and it's very exciting. But when you actually get paid anything for a poem, you're immediately in the elite 0.001% of all poets ever. Not just living poets, but ever in the world. And and all poets who just saw that go, yeah, yeah. And so he encouraged me, because our correspondence was really very much about my, I don't remember my dreams most of the time. I only remember feelings, you know. Sometimes I will remember them, and when I do, it's usually like some very specific memory, and it's, you know, kind of shocking. And so he encouraged me to stay in my dreams, to try to stay in there and find a poem from there. And so this poem came from that. It's very short. I talk in my sleep of angry things. I talk in my sleep of angry things in the early light, louder than I ought to speak. As she stirs up out of sleep, she puts over me arms and legs, despite the words, despite the worrying words. So, all right. So the next poem, it's the last poem, and this is the first poem that I ever had published. And so we're getting pretty close to the end, but I told you Charles Bukowski, so this is important here. So I took this line. There's a great old poet's trick called cribbing a line. And that's when you take a line from a poem and you make that a title for another poem. Very often it is a trick for younger poets and poets who have found themselves in the throes of writer's block. So you take a poem and you have the cadence kind of that poet in your head, and it's almost like you take the beats of that poem and you try to rewrite it and hear that poem while you're putting your own words to it, right? So, you know, you can, it's it's a sample in poets' terms, very similar to what happens in music. So anyways, Charles Bukowski has this great line that's in a poem, and the line is, "So rude the flowers that grow and do not grow beautiful." So when I wrote this poem, and you'll see it, this version of the poem, there was an original version of the poem which had many more lines that were much too similar to Charles Bukowski. But I love those lines. I love them so much. So Willard Greenwood, who, you know, in the poetry world, he's a superstar. He's the editor of the Hiram Poetry Review in Hiram, Ohio, which is published by Hiram College. And it's a school with a lot of history. It was not always a liberal arts school. It was founded as a super conservative Christian college, and then eventually became the Hiram College as it is today. But it's a really cool school, and I had sent him this poem through Pen America. You know, if you know anything about Pen America, that's a place where poets can send poems and then get sent out to submit. And he wrote back to me, and he was the first editor who had ever written back to me. And he had sent me this little card, you know, the little rejection cards. And I remember getting it in a one white envelope, and I saw it had ink on the back. And I got really excited. I was like, oh, there's like some hope there. So, you know, in the front, it's, you know, this poem, you know, we can't quite take this poem, blah, blah, blah. So then I flipped it over, and on the back was a note from Willard. And the note said, "This poem is good, but it could be great. You need to rewrite it and kill your babies. Willard." And I did not know what he meant at the time. I know now what he meant. So I went back and I reread the poem, and I read it over and over and over again. And I found there was 3 lines, very much Charles Bukowski, you know, pushed lines that I loved. And I kind of loved them too much. And then I realized those were the babies. So I took those lines out of the poem, I rewrote it into this form that you see today, and it was the first poem that I ever had published. I got copies of the magazine, and I think I got $7. And it was a very, very happy day when I received the acceptance letter. So this is my last poem for today, and the last poem in the book. So rude the flowers that grow and do not grow beautiful. She said she was a wallflower in high school, and I understand, because much hasn't changed. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, and the bartenders are getting antsy and a bit short. Her friend, much easier on the eyes, is on the floor of the bathroom with a biker way, way past his prime. I am old again. She is all that's left, and it's about my time. I make a show to find my keys and ask her if she needs a ride home. One glance at the bathroom, and back to me. The shade of flower that she was blooms in the night. I'm only embarrassed in public and happy in the early light. I am free again. She said she was a wildflower in college, and I understand, because much hasn't changed. that was published in April of 2012. Thank you very much. I'm super grateful. If I can say anything, if there are any poets, especially young poets out there, the key to writing poetry is to write. Write as much as you can, and when you feel that you're blocked, you can do what I suggested, you can crib a line, but an even better way is to read more poetry. Read as much and as widely as you can. Read the poets they tell you not to read, please, and then read them again, and connect them, get an understanding of their life, because when you can get in the context of what a poet's lived like, you can kind of get an understanding behind the poems. I hope that you enjoyed it.
So, wait up there.
Yeah.
Kathy came in late. She's actually our host, but she was busy teaching, because she's a teacher, this evening, so she may have some questions for you.
Sure.
Yes, absolutely. So I apologize for popping
Oh,
in
no
late.
way.
So in terms of, like, you were giving advice for younger poets, when did you start writing?
I think I first started writing probably when I was like 7 or 8, and it was encouraged by my mom to write. We were super poor, and so sometimes we were homeless, and so to keep me busy, she would hand me yellow legal pads and pens and say write, and I would write. And so it just became a habit. And so now today I still probably read 2 to 3 hours every day. And then I'm always writing, even in my head a lot, but I would probably say I write, a couple hours a day too.
And where do you have paper on you? Do you write on your phone now?
I would say I tend to write electronically more now than ever, only because it's instantaneous, right? But I have pads of paper and everywhere. There's all kinds of places. I take notes a lot, depending on what I'm doing, what I'm listening to, where I'm at. I like to doodle, which you've probably heard a couple references here in the poems. And I find that when I doodle, it gets my mind into the space to be able to actually, read and write. So I have paper everywhere, if that makes sense. Sometimes I take notes on my phone, but I do find that taking notes on my phone is more conducive to journalism than it is to writing poetry. And so I tend to do that when I'm doing interviews and things like that. I also work as a newspaper reporter for This Week in Worcester. So.
When you mentioned several time periods in your life where maybe you were at your lowest, were you still writing then?
Oh, absolutely. I think that the common theme in my life is writing. It's just always been the same, always been something that helps me get through time. And then, like, these poems, I remember some of the lower times in my life and how I was able to create something beautiful from those memories. And a lot of the writing I do is from POV kind of work, which is like I put myself into a character that isn't exactly me, but I add elements of the person that I'm thinking about or the experiences that I am to kind of reach in there. Kind of a method actor trick, really, is to become more like the person, the subject you're thinking about. But often, I went through it. And I understand exactly what the person is feeling like. Obviously we don't know and experience everybody's trauma, and there's always someone who has experienced worse than you. But I do find it that I can connect with it, and then that's how I get the lines that I get, if that makes sense.
Who do you like to read? Is there a particular genre that you like to read?
Of poetry or books in general?
I would say books in general.
I would say that I consume all. I am very much the human version of Johnny Five from the movie Short Circuit. So I eat writing. I like to read a lot. But if I had to pick, if I was forced at gunpoint, you said, you must pick a genre. I guess it would probably be fantasy. And by fantasy, I don't mean like high world building kind of stuff, so Tolkien, that kind of stuff I like. I like, my favorite thing in the world is gnomes. And gnomes and dwarves and elves. Leon likes elves, and I tend to like that kind of stuff. And so obviously when I was young and poor, reading those books and being in those worlds were always kind of fun. And so I think probably fantasy. But I've read everything. I've read thousands of mystery novels, and I've read a tremendous amount of romance novel. Everything, you name it, I've read it all. My favorite book of all time, though, is Don Quixote. Without fail. I've read Don Quixote probably 25 or 30 times in multiple languages, and I've translated it a couple of times, and I love it. Just absolutely outstanding. One of the greatest books of all time, and it's kind of lost on the modern education system because it's really hard to teach unless you have a comprehensive understanding of. At minimum, you need to understand Spanish, Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. Otherwise, you won't get the book. But there are parts of it that could be taught. I think everybody likes the windmills, but that's not even the best part of the book. The best part of the book, and this is going to be funny for the camera, is when he strips naked and goes crazy in the woods. So that'll probably get a bunch of kids to run out and go read it. But it's not what you think. It's actually pretty funny and very, very interesting scene. But I think I like that kind of stuff. Dante's Inferno, The Brothers Karamazov, another book. I used to do this thing every year around my birthday where I'd read all three of them side by side. So I'd read Don Quixote, Dante, and the Brothers Karamazov, which is a very interesting experience because Dante, the whole book, The Divine Comedy, is a short book. It's not a very long book. So you have to time it. But if you time the cantos just the right way, you can, and of course, having done it a long time, you can get it where Don Quixote is losing his first battle, right, against the Knight of the Flowers. Dante the priest that did some bad stuff is being stepped on his back. And in Brothers Karamazov, it's the chapter where the priest runs into Jesus, the bad priest, and he runs into a modern version of Jesus, and then hides and doesn't want him to be around. I don't want to ruin the books for anybody who hasn't read them because I find more and more people have not read those books. And you should. Don't be afraid to read old books. Please. There's a reason why revolutions and changes and all kinds of wonderful things that we have in the modern world here today exist, and that's because of some of those old books. So go read them as much as you can. So I have a working, a pretty good grasp on those languages, and so again, another thing about being a poet and reading all the time is you end up just going down the line. But I have the equivalent of a degree in Greek and Hebrew and Latin, and so I'm able to be in that world and understand what Cervantes was trying to say. That's a lot.
No, thank you. So fascinating. So in today's political climate where censorship is so prevalent, unfortunately, today, and that libraries are under fire, and certainly artists, writers, etc. I guess I'm asking, what advice or what are your thoughts on how to keep the power of the pen going and the freedom to read all the texts that you mentioned and more?
So it's a great question. I guess the way that I answer it is this. I don't know that there's ever been a time ever in human society where people have been completely free. It's close to, and then it drops back down into control, right? And it's always about that power and control and controlling how people think. But where you are always free is in your mind. People cannot control your mind. And so I think that the way that artists should encourage each other is that if you do have a platform of any kind, you got to say it. You have to be brave, and you have to be willing to speak out, and you have to be able to call out not just the particular flavor of politics that is bad now. You have to also show how that particular bad guy may have gotten the thought process to be able to do what he did, which is other people also trying to censor stuff, including stuff that really is bad, right? So sometimes you have to deal with the fact, and I always tell this story, and my story is about the racist bar, right? I came up with this many, many years ago. This is my theory. If you really truly want to deal with free speech, you have to let the racist bar open. And then what you do is, you buy the land across the street and you open a bar that's not racist. And then you let the world work it out, right? And so you can't worry about what other people are going to say. You can't live in fear. And if you do, you've seen what we have history. History repeats itself all the time. People will always cower in the dark versus confrontation. People are afraid of confrontation. I have a very, very small platform. It is not a big one, but it's gotten bigger over the last couple of years. And I think that I can use it to be brave and to be willing to stand up and say, I don't like that. I don't agree with that. But it also means I have to say the same thing to my friends who might think the same as me, but when they get a hold of power, they immediately go after the person that they used to not like. And so you have to let harmful things be said out loud so you know who wants to say them. How do you know what's bad if you don't let people talk? And the other thing is, I'm very verbose, as you can tell. And I have friends who are not, right? And you have to encourage people to talk. And so you cannot just dominate the space. And so you have to learn to listen more than anything. And I think in listening and hearing people's thoughts and ideas, you can get an understanding of maybe who they are. There's a great scene in Star Trek. I don't know how many people. I am a dork, just so you know. Ultra. But this is a great scene in Star Trek where Picard is captured by the Romulans, and there's these lights, and the Romulan guy is trying to get him to say how many lights there are, and he refuses to say what it is, and then that's like torture. He keeps telling him to say the thing that is not real, and Picard knows that the amount of lights is not. He's lying. So when you know adamantly in your soul something is real, you have to say that. You can't say the sky is red if it's not red. Sometimes it's red in the morning, right, when the dawn breaks or when it's calm, But generally speaking, the sky is blue. And if the sky is blue, you can say it's blue. It goes back to a little bit to my philosophy studies. So postmodernism might be the worst thing that ever happened to philosophy. But postmodernism basically says whatever I say is, right? But if you're in heart surgery and a doctor determines that a brick is your replacement heart, you're going to die. That's reality. And so you have to say something is what it is. Don't call a brick a heart. If this is wood and it knocks, it's real. And it's okay to stand on some things. So I think that's the other part of being someone who can be brave. You also have to stand on your convictions and don't just go with what the crowd says, because it's so easy to do that. Then all of a sudden you're doing something you really don't feel comfortable with, and you're lying to yourself. You don't have to accept everybody's everything to be a leader, to be a trailblazer. You can actually just stand up on your own. And I think a lot of these older artists, Cervantes in particular, he was writing in the middle of the Spanish Inquisition and one of the worst times of censorship there ever was. And in fact, if you go read some of those writings, they were just making it up based on how you looked, right? So like someone would look a certain way, and the Dominicans would be like, I don't like the look of his face, he's a closet this, and that's it. And that was it didn't need to be anything else. Go to the French Revolution. It's a wonderful thing. We all like to look at those writings, but then there was a turn, right? There was a turn, and all of a sudden it was like you didn't line up exactly the way, so we're chopping you up. I did notice in some of the protests in Portland, the guillotine showed up. I don't know that that's what I want to see, because I read those books too, and it ends up in the end that the revolutionaries ended up all being killed, right? So Robespierre, if anybody wants to read about a great, you go read about that guy, and he was chopping everybody's heads off, and in the end, he got his head chopped off. So there is very much a part, I guess, of reality where you live by how you are. So if you want everybody to treat you with kindness and respect, you should probably treat them with kindness and respect. If you want to be heard, you should listen. If you want to be listened to, you should be heard, right? There's those things are very much normal, common sense, and I just think people have lost that connection. Whenever they get some kind of authority, they use it to punch down, and I've done that, and that's the other thing. I think a real important thing is I just wrote a piece for my Substack. I have a Substack, and it's called Moral Clarity, and I have only one thing that I have moral clarity on, and that is I'm not perfect. If I can live in that space, then every person I meet is also not perfect. And so then it really makes it hard for me to judge them when they show me their imperfections, because I'm looking at mine, right? It's very biblical of me to say that, right? Take the log out of your eye before you look at the splinter in your brother's eye. And I think that common sense is something that exists throughout culture, right? But that line very much makes a lot of sense. Don't judge first when you yourself are doing it. I think that's what we see in our leaders. especially today, most of the leaders are accusatory without being self-reflective. And the very few that are self-reflective are not really given the platform, right? And so whenever you have a chance, whatever little space you can do it in, do it. Even if it's only a room with 5 people in it, you need to share and give people the opportunity and listen, hear what people are going through. Because in the end, when you're tied down and you want someone to hear you, you better hope that you were listening. That's kind of dramatic. Are there any other questions?
Yeah.
Nothing?
Thank you.
What about from the peanut gallery? Do you have any questions back there?
I just found it very inspiring. Like that was truly amazing to hear you phrase everything that way. Like I took a lot of inspiration from that.
All right, I'm grateful.
I'll say one thing, going back to once you put it out there, you don't own it. When you were telling the story, reading the poem about setting up the sound for the musician, and there's an old guy who couldn't get the guitar, and I'm in my head, I'm McGill Raines, and it's Pine Top Perkins. I saw him, he must have been in his 90s, one of the greatest blues pianists ever. And I had a hard time walking in, and I'm thinking, oh, it must be an old blues guy. And then you said Boyo. In the poem, I'm like, wait a minute. This is not enough. So it immediately, it's funny where my head went with the story, and then that one word just brought me right back to where it was. But it's amazing how up to certain points it's so different for everyone when you hear it to what the actual story behind it is.
Yeah, I agree. That word boyo too. It's so time specific, because now even the Irish immigrants now, they just don't say it anymore, because slang in Ireland has changed.
Yeah.
Slang in Ireland when I was younger led to we were all from immigrant families to talk a certain way, and very much it came from the movie My Left Foot. So if you ever seen the movie My Left Foot, very much that language was all Boston Irish guys would talk like that. And so that word is very much gone now, except for the old guys.
Right.
So as soon as you hear it, it like brings you back to a very specific time, you know. Wild Rover. So I don't know if you know the song Wild Rover, but is a classic Irish song, and it just isn't like heard anymore. And so when you sing it or when you think it out loud, it brings back a specific time. And so I like to put like a little something in there so it helps the reader kind of maybe think about that too. But you could change that word out for any particular cultural word. I think that would sound like an old person in that moment getting excited and not knowing my name. That was the other thing. He did not know my name. And it was funny, years later, I was around that same group, and they, not him, but like his brother, who was maybe 15 years younger than him, told this story about the sound guy that he loved. And I was there in the room, and they were talking about it, and it was me. But they gave credit to a complete different person. And I was like, well, he couldn't see me, and he definitely didn't remember my name, so that was okay. So then I have the poem, and I did see Brian O'Donovan before he passed away, and he remembered. So that was always nice that he remembered my name, which I always thought was like a big deal. And because he was kind of a big guy especially in Massachusetts, for when it came to Irish Celtic music. And so the fact that he would see me and be like, John, and I was like, oh, that's nice. That was nice. And I remember it came from that story. All right.